Did you ever have any personal evangelism training? Programs like Evangelism Explosion were widely used in many churches back in the day. Christian Witness Training, CWT, was another. Share Jesus Without Fear, XEE. Any of this ringing a bell? I went through a couple of these trainings. What I got from much of this program training was a little inspiration, but even more frustration. Most of the training that was around gave you one methodology, no matter how you were wired personally or how you were uniquely gifted. Many who went through such training felt a sense of guilt over not being able to effectively share their faith using the methods they were taught. It felt as though there were only two options. Either you were gifted so that such personal evangelism was comfortable for you, or you were guilted into presenting the gospel in ways that were very unnatural for you. If that was the case, you believed the approach you were given in the training was the only way to do it, and you pretty much gave up trying to share the good news at all. Frustrating. But what if you can bear witness to the good news of Jesus in everyday life in ways that are very normal for you and come very naturally? So today what I want to do is give you some ideas and some actions that I think will help you develop a missional approach to your personal evangelism. The gospel is good news, first of all. Let me rephrase that. The gospel is the greatest news ever in the history of eternity. And good news needs to be announced. That's what evangelism is, the announcing of good news. In the ancient culture that the church was birthed in, people had a specific understanding of what good news is. There were three major characteristics of good news. One, good news was a new and unexpected development within a much longer story. Two, good news was about something that had already happened, and as a result, everything going forward would be different. And three, it introduced a period of waiting that changed people's expectations and produced excitement over the future. Here's an example of how people of that time and culture would perceive good news. Let's say there was a region, a nation, or a kingdom that was under the rule of a really bad leader, and the people were majorly oppressed and miserable. Another individual arises and leads a rebellion and challenges this leader, and they go to war. The challenger eventually leads his army to victory on a battlefield far away, and they send a messenger back to the people to tell them of the victory. It takes a while for the messenger to get there to announce the good news. Can you imagine the joy and relief of the people when they learn a new leader is in power? The defeat of the terrible leader was a new and unexpected development within their longer story or history. It's something that had already happened, and now everything will be different for the people. It's going to take some time for the new leader to finish off any pockets of resistance and establish his rule, so people wait with excitement and expectation over their new future. This is exactly what has happened with Jesus. God interrupted history by taking on flesh in Jesus and doing perfectly what Adam and Eve and Israel had failed to do. Because of Jesus, everything is now different for our lives. And now we live in confidence and expectation because of Jesus, and we wait with excitement over our future. So that's why the word gospel was used by the New Testament writers to describe what God has done for us through Jesus. Another thing, share the good news out of grace, not guilt. Sure, we have an obligation to share the gospel with others, but obligation alone is not the proper motivation. You get to share this good news. So if your reason for sharing is because you get to do so, instead of because you ought to or have to share, it makes all the difference. Speaking the gospel to someone else is a privilege, something you get to do because of God's grace. A third thing, relationship is the context for effective sharing. Evangelism approaches that emphasize witnessing to people you don't know or barely know are intimidating for most Christians. Now, some can do it with little problem, but it freaks the rest of us out. If you have built a trusting relationship with a person, you have earned the right to speak into their lives. I find it's far more effective and more likely to produce lasting results if I share the gospel within the context of relationship. There is a built-in opportunity to continue the conversation later. In relationship, the other person can see the gospel at work in your own life. They have the chance to ask questions. I think it's better than the hit and run technique, or just tossing a gospel grenade into the random conversation. Another thing, stay alert for gospel pathways. Gospel pathways are natural opportunities that arise in the course of everyday life where you can speak the gospel into someone's life. Sharing your faith does not require an appointment. You don't have to schedule a time for spiritual conversation with someone. It can happen while you're working on a project together, sitting at lunch, riding in a vehicle together to a ball game. Any point. The person mentions an issue of concern, a problem, or a question they have. And that may be God's opening for you to say something about how the gospel is good news for them in that moment. So let me sum it all up. Number one, always remember that the good news is truly good news. Number two, share the good news because you get to. 3, build trusting relationships and share the gospel within that context. Number 4, watch and listen for natural opportunities to speak the gospel. So take heart. You can share the good news just being who God designed you to be in the way that comes natural to you. Now you just need to be intentional about it. What struggles have you faced in sharing your faith with someone? What has helped you to overcome fear or guilt in your witnessing attempts? Y'all have a great week.